As an executive or manager, emotional vulnerability can be a major risk factor. So in today's video, I'm going to reveal the top 3 perceived risks of being emotionally vulnerable and why it's important that you take those risks if you want to build a strong culture and increase your bottom line. My name is Adam Piendis. I'm a leadership coach. For the last 25 years, I've been developing leaders and building teams and cultures from around the globe. I'm excited to be here today, so let's dive into it. Now, the most important thing that you can have and build within any culture is trust. And the only way that you as a leader can develop trust with others is if you're willing to be vulnerable. Now, in really simple terms, what this means is being more connected to your emotions, letting your guard down, and creating meaningful connection with the people around you and the people that work for you. Now, being vulnerable doesn't come without its risks. You may have some major questions and concerns around how appropriate is it to be vulnerable in the workplace. Now, when you lead with vulnerability, vulnerability follows. This is how you develop as a leader. This is how you build stronger teams, but we don't want to pretend that the risks and concerns aren't there. So today's video, I'm going to dive into the top 3 perceived risks that are out there. But before I do, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications. Now, the top perceived risks that I see time and time again with the people that I work with, and I imagine that you have felt this before as well, is a fear of judgment. You don't want to be judged by the people around you when you're vulnerable, and you do not want to be perceived as weak. There's this belief that if you're vulnerable, it is a sign of weakness. And this is actually an extension of the old paradigm of leadership, where you were told to step into leadership positions always from a position of strength, never be vulnerable, never show sign of weakness, and always let people know that you know exactly what you're doing at every single minute of the day. Well, as we know, that's not real. There's no way that you're going to have an idea of the right thing to do at all times. So the more willing you are to expose yourself in this way, the more people are going to be able to relate to you. And there's this old belief that being vulnerable could impact your professional reputation, or it could impact your ability to hold a position of authority. Well, what we've learned over time, again, is when you're willing to expose yourself and you're willing to connect in a meaningful way, this is actually when you develop a reputation of strength and when you can actually have more authority because people trust you in the end. All right, the second perceived risk that I'm going to talk about today is around power dynamics. There's a belief that if you expose yourself through vulnerability and you allow yourself for people to connect with you, that the power dynamics are going to shift. You're no longer going to have this upper hand or this position of authority, and then things are going to start to flatten out. And if things flatten out, you may be thinking, well, how the heck are we going to get anything done? If we're all sitting on the same level, who's actually going to respond to who? And we may just be stagnant and never be able to push anything forward. Well, the truth is, on the surface, it may seem this way, and if you've never actually practiced it, then it's going to be really difficult to tell if this form of communication is actually going to be effective. Well, what ends up happening is that when people can relate to you in a certain way, yes, you can sort of flatten out in the sense of being able to relate to one another from a human level, but you can also still maintain that power dynamic where people are there to follow your lead. And again, the more vulnerable you are, the more willing people are going to be to get behind you and move an idea forward. Or you may actually have this other concern where you say, okay, if I'm going to be vulnerable and share, what if the people around me don't share their own vulnerabilities? Then what? Well, I think this is a legitimate concern. And I'm going to go back to this idea of practice. The more that you can practice this and actually step forward with the sense of authority that, like, hey, this is who I am, this is where my challenges are, the more you're going to relate to other people on a human level, and the more willing they're going to be to let their own guards down and share in their own vulnerabilities as well. Before I get into the third perceived risk, if you haven't already, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment below if any of these perceived risks that I talked about today feel familiar. I would love to get your thoughts and learn about any experiences that you've had around vulnerability in the workplace as well. Okay, the third perceived risk that I'm going to talk about today is that vulnerability is going to have an impact on your decision making. If you overshare and you reveal too much and you get too connected in another person's personal life, how are you going to know if you're making decisions on a personal level versus a professional level? Is this going to make you more indecisive? Are they going to stop following you as a result? And is it ultimately going to undermine your credibility as a leader? Now, these are all great concerns and questions that you may have, and I think that it is worthwhile to consider, okay, I know that I need to be vulnerable and I know that I need to connect in a meaningful personal manner, but this doesn't mean that you always have to just expose everything in your personal life. There are boundaries that you can create in the process. You don't have to tell them everything that's happening or every decision that you've ever made. You will have to use discernment in the process, right? And decipher, okay, I know I need to connect with them, but I don't have to share and expose everything that's ever happened in my life. And all of this comes with practice. Over time, you're going to start to learn, okay, I know when it's time to share, when it's time to connect, and perhaps when it's time to pull away and create a little bit of a boundary. At the end of the day, it's about open communication. It's about building the type of culture that you want. And as we shared at the beginning, it's about building trust. The more that you are willing to be vulnerable, the more that you're willing to say, hey, I don't have all the answers all the time. I'm going to make some mistakes. I may have my own fears. I want to learn about those things from you. This is how you build trust. This is how you build a strong culture. And this ultimately is how you increase your bottom line. Okay, those are the top 3 perceived risks around being vulnerable. If they sound familiar to you, please let me know. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, share any comments that you may have. I would love to hear from you. And I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Take care.